let's go ahead and dive right in. So hi again, welcome everyone. I'm Catherine Jett with RealTime Talent, and we are really excited to be here with you again for the 5th year, presenting insights on the demand for transportation talent. And this year, similar to last, we also are presenting some insights about talent supply. And these are all fresh and updated with 2024 data we're really excited to share with you. So I'll just take a moment to let all of my colleagues introduce themselves. So again, I'm Catherine Jett. I'm a research strategist with RealTime Talent, and I'll pass to Erin.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Erin Olson. I'm the Senior Director of Strategic Research with RealTime Talent.
Hello, everyone. I'm Melinda Fierro. I am another research strategist with RealTime Talent. Happy to see everyone here.
And you'll be hearing more from all of us throughout the hour together. So with our webinar today, we do have a chat that's active, and we welcome you to drop any questions in at any time. Just for starters, if you'd like to drop in your name and the company or organization that you're affiliated with, just to help us kick things off, that would be wonderful. And again, feel free to use that chat throughout the presentation for any questions. So this presentation is accompanied by a series of 6 reports that are available on the Transportation Center of Excellence website. The website link is here, and we also have a QR code that we will show you later on. And there's much more information there, so we would encourage you to really dive in. We are looking at these 6 sectors specifically, covering trends in employment, wages, skill demand, forecasted needs for these pathways and the occupations within them. So this is just a preview of the report contents that we have for you available for each of those 6 pathways. It's about 20 pages per. And there's just even more information about supply and demand, what industries employ talent demographics, specifics on skills, knowledge areas, tools, technologies, certifications that are in demand today. And this is like the fresh, latest up to the minute data as of the end of 2024. So we encourage you to take a deeper dive in whatever pathways you may be interested in. So to kick things off, we'll just take a look at the transportation sector overall. Here we have our 6 pathways, all the transportation occupations together, and then total for the whole state of Minnesota for all occupations. So just looking at statewide employment, it grew by about 25,000 workers between the second quarter of 2023 and the second quarter of 2024, which is about a 0.8% increase. And while we've seen quite a great recovery from the pandemic, the growth has kind of cooled off a little bit in the past year and kind of stabilized somewhat. Looking back to 2019, which is shown here in this 5-year history column, employment grew about 8,800 workers across all occupations, or 0.1% average annual growth in total employment. Over the next 5 years, which you can see on the right of this table through 2029, overall employment is forecast to remain pretty flat at 0% average annual growth, with careers in transportation altogether forecasting slight growth of 0.1% average per year, which will be just over 700 new jobs added statewide over the next 5 years. So here we can see kind of high-level statistics for each of those 6 career pathways and forecasts for the next 5 years, all side by side. So just some things that pop out. The truck driving pathway still has the highest forecast growth, now at 0.2%, so pretty modest, but still the highest that we have. And that's higher than the state's overall forecast. By wage, aviation offers by far the highest average annual wages, while collision repair is the pathway most uniquely concentrated in Minnesota compared to what we see on a national scale. Diesel equipment and truck is now the pathway with the lowest overall unemployment rate at 0.7% statewide, quite low. And projected employment forecasts for each pathway are fairly flat, ranging from 0.3% decline annually to 0.2% growth. And the pathways with expected growth over the next 5 years are automotive technology, diesel equipment and truck driving. And we're going to dig into each of these 6 pathways one by one next. I'll take the first two, and then I'm going to pass the mic, and each of my colleagues will cover two of them. So first, automotive technology. This has the second highest total employment among all 6 transportation pathways. And looking ahead, we see pretty flat employment forecast over the next 5 years. Still, given turnover, about 38% of positions held today will need to be filled by new talent in that time period. And top industries of employment for automotive technology occupations are automotive repair and maintenance, automobile dealers, and architectural engineering and related services. So let's get into more detail about the specific occupations included in automotive technology. Mechanical engineering technicians and mechanical engineers are uniquely concentrated in Minnesota to a higher degree than seen in the nation overall. And on average, automotive technology careers pay about $70,800 per year, which is about $1,300 higher than the average statewide wage across all occupations. Employment growth was 0.1% since the second quarter of 2023. And overall unemployment in the pathway is very low at 1.5%, with electrical and electronics installers and repairers for transportation equipment having the lowest unemployment rate at 0.9%.
Catherine, I think you need to advance the slide.
Oh, thank you, Melinda. I thought I had. Appreciate that. So now you can see what I've been talking about. Here we go. These are the component occupations that make up the automotive technology pathway. And so looking at the pathway overall and types of employers, about 89% of people work for private employers. About 4% work for government entities, whether state, federal, or local. And the share of talent that's self-employed increased slightly over the past year to about 7%. This next slide shows information about job postings in 2023 and 2024 specifically. So you can see here kind of the trend in number of posts over that time period. And there's more information about job postings, kind of doing a deep dive into the 2024 postings in the full report. So overall, there were over 4,800 new jobs advertised in automotive technology in 2024 calendar year, which was a decrease of 14% from the prior year. And the volume of positions advertised by staffing and temp agencies in the pathway increased to being about 16% of all postings. An analysis of the skill sets sought in postings compared to the available talent pool is available in the full report for each career pathway. Great. So here we can see wages and education and training requirements for each of the occupations in the pathway. So entry-level wages here exceed the average entry-level wages observed across all occupations statewide by over $14,000. So entry-level wages, again, on average, in the automotive technology pathway are about $48,600 annually. And that's a little bit higher than last year. Education and training requirements vary across the different occupations in the pathway, with mechanical engineers requiring a bachelor's degree, whereas electronic equipment installers and repairers typically require a high school diploma or equivalent. And none of these occupations require previous work experience, although 3 require some level of on-the-job training. And I want to call out here just at the beginning of our time that if you've joined us in past years, last year and this year, the methodology for estimating wages changed from prior years. So last year was the first year with the new methodology, and this year that methodology remains intact. So if you're comparing to years beyond that, we're not actually looking quite at apples to apples. But the good news is that these are estimated as of the most recent quarter of data available using data from the BLS. And other data, and it doesn't lag by a calendar year, so it's as up to date as possible. This year, again, we did an analysis of wages by region of the state. And so you'll see here, we kind of grouped together the MSP metro area, other urban areas in the state, and then rural areas in the state. So you can see that over half of the statewide employment is within the MSP metro. And the MSP metro does have, on average, higher wages than other regions of the state, which between rural and urban greater Minnesota, they have fairly similar wages. And In the report, you'll also see kind of the addition of more information than is presented here and in the prior slide. Here we're showing median wages, which is kind of like the person right in the middle. What is the wage that they make? And in the report, we show other percentiles as well, so that you can see kind of on the lower end or the higher end, what are those wages looking like for folks who are working in the pathway. Some more information from our job postings here. This is just another way to look at wage trends, is what wages are being advertised right now for these roles, as opposed to what we saw in the prior slide, which is what do people in these roles actually make right now. So here we see the posted hourly rate is about $29 an hour. And we can see kind of the change over time here on the right, how that wage has been to some degree stabilizing and increasing a little bit. Next, we'll take a look at the local talent supply. So there's an overall pathway unemployment rate of 1.5%, which means a little over 300 people in the pathway are currently unemployed. And all roles have quite low unemployment rates. An additional 1,300 or so professionals are underemployed, meaning they're working in roles for which they're overqualified by education or experience. And the chart on the left here shows educational attainment of talent working in these roles right now. So over a third of the workforce has a high school diploma or less, and a similar share has a bachelor's degree or higher. And actually about 1 in 10 workers in the field hold a master's or PhD. Looking at some more talent demographics, we can see kind of the age distribution and race and ethnicity as well as gender. We see that by and large, the largest demographic group by race is white, with about 86% of talent, with the next largest cohort being Asian talent at about 5.1%. Just over 6% of the workforce are Hispanic or Latina, and just 5% are female, which is similar to what we saw last year. In the report, you'll also find information on the demographics of folks graduating from programs that are aligned to the automotive technology occupations. So those people who are kind of coming down the line and maybe starting in their careers, do their demographics look similar to this, or are we perhaps branching out? Check the report and find out. This slide will show the awards that were granted in the most recent school year for which there's information, which is school year 2023. These are programs that may be aligned with multiple occupations within the pathway. So these degrees and certificates have some versatility to them. They could lead to a number of different occupations. There were around 1,500 awards conferred at 20 different institutions in programs that were aligned to automotive technology careers in school year 2023. Among these, 373 were at the associate level, 360 were certificates that could be earned in less than 2 years. Moving on to aviation. So the aviation pathway also includes drone technology too, and professionals in aviation and drone technology work in diverse roles, from piloting, air traffic controlling, aircraft maintenance technician, as well as designing, servicing, or piloting drones. So in all, over 10,000 people work in aviation and drone technology roles in Minnesota as of the second quarter 2024, which is almost a 10% increase from a year prior. So that's some really significant growth, especially compared to some of the other pathways that we're looking at today. However, aviation and drone technology employment is also anticipated to be pretty flat in Minnesota at minus 0.1% change annually, declining by about 57 total jobs. Baseline demand is anticipated to be about 4,400 professionals needed to fill positions simply due to turnover, even despite the fact that we see a flat or slightly declining forecast. We will still need in the next 5 years, 4,400 professionals to step into these roles. And aviation and drone technology talent is primarily concentrated in the scheduled air transportation industry, about 40% of talent, but also works in a wide variety of industries in the state. Great, okay. So there are a number of occupations in this pathway that are uniquely concentrated in Minnesota. So that's indicated here by this column that says LQ. If it's higher than 1, that means that that profession is, that more of those professionals are seen in our state than would be expected on average in the nation. So for example, airline pilots, 1.42 times more airline pilots in our state than in the average place in the nation. Aviation careers pay about $132,000 a year on average, which is much higher than our average statewide wage. It's getting close to double, although there's significant variation in wages across the field. About 85% of people employed in this pathway work for private employers, while only 1.4% are self-employed. So that means almost 14% are working for state, federal, or local government entities, mostly federal. Looking at job postings, there were 767 new jobs advertised in aviation careers during 2024, which was a decrease of 16% compared to the prior year. And the volume of positions advertised by staffing and temp agencies grew to 14% of postings. There were about 3 hires for every unique posting that appears on the internet. And, this can really vary. So just because there were 767 postings doesn't mean that that's the number of people that were hired. There were actually 3 times that many that were probably hired. Great. So the aviation and drone technology pathway saw wage averages increase from the prior year's estimates for all occupations in the pathway. Entry-level wages here far exceed the average entry-level wages statewide, paying an average of $87K for entry-level talent. Education and training requirements vary across occupations from high school GED to bachelor's degrees. And the majority of occupations don't require previous work experience, with the exception of aircraft cargo handling supervisors and airline pilots. Looking at wages by region, of course, they vary, and the MSP metro region has the highest wages across experience levels and percentiles. While entry-level wages in rural greater Minnesota and urban greater Minnesota are pretty close, wages vary a little bit, and wages for more experienced workers are higher in urban greater Minnesota. And the difference in wages here isn't a huge surprise, since nearly 80% of all jobs in aviation are concentrated in the metro area. So the median posted wage was $24.43 per hour last year on average, which was a bit of an increase over the prior year. And you can see the 2-year wage trend line on the right as well, seeing advertised wages increasing by 74% since 2022 here on the right. At an overall pathway unemployment rate of 1%, which is, again, very low, there are just over 100 unemployed people in the aviation and drone technology field, and an additional 1,200 may be underemployed. Great. So here we can take a quick look at demographics in the field. Again, similar to automotive technology, we have 86% of talent are white. Here, Asian talent is the next largest group at about 6.2%, and 4.3% are Hispanic or Latina. Just about 10% of talent in the field are female. Great. So again, the programs listed here may align to more than one occupation in the pathway. And because there are many, many programs that align to this pathway, we couldn't quite fit them all on this slide. We're listing out here those that had 10 awards or more in 2023. And then we've kind of rolled everybody else up together in this last line, all remaining programs aligned to the pathway. But the full details are available in the report. So in total, there were over 700 awards conferred by 31 different Minnesota institutions in 2023. Among these, 266 were at the associate level, and 133 were certificates that could be earned in less than 2 years. There's also an increase in remote programs and awards compared to the prior year. And of course, some of these awards can align to not only occupations within aviation and drone technology, but other occupations outside the career pathway in different STEM and manufacturing fields. And I'll now pass the mic over to Melinda to talk us through collision repair and the next pathway.
All right, thank you, Catherine. So the third one of our 6 pathways are professionals in collision repair work. Roles in this pathway include things like auto body repairers and glass installers, also auto body painting, serving industries as diverse as navigational manufacturing and automobile dealerships. In this pathway, there are about 7,000 people working in Minnesota as of the second quarter 2024, which was a slight increase from a year prior. This particular pathway has the highest overall location quotient or concentration in Minnesota of the 6 pathways at 1.09. It again has a low unemployment rate of 2.4% or 179 people. And in a similar vein, has about 41% of the roles that will need to be replaced in the next 5 years due to exits, retirements, and other things. The top industries of employment in this pathway are automotive repair and maintenance, automobile dealers, and coating, engraving, heat treating, and allied activities. About 93% of people employed in collision repair careers in Minnesota work for private employers. 7% are estimated to be self-employed, which is a slight decrease, and the remaining 0.7% work for state, federal, or local government entities. Moving into the occupations, there are 3 occupations aligned in this pathway, and you can see that all of that, or 2 of them, have a higher location quotient compared to nationwide. The exception being the automotive glass installers, which is actually fairly close to 1, which still means that it's pretty concentrated. All right. Moving to job postings. There were 616 new jobs advertised in this pathway across Minnesota during the time frame. This was actually a 37% decrease from the prior 12-month period, following what had been a 38% increase between 2022 and 2023. The share of positions advertised by staffing and temp agencies decreased also from 23% to 20%. And in this pathway, there were 4 hires for every unique job posting advertised. And as with all the other pathways, more details about skill sets in these advertised jobs can be found in the reports. Looking at wages and experience level requirements, this pathway saw an overall jump in average wages, with wages growing about $5,600 compared to the prior year's estimates. All 3 occupations saw increases. Entry-level wages in this pathway also exceed the entry-level wages observed across all occupations by over $5,000. And education requirements are similar across this pathway, with each occupation requiring a high school diploma or equivalent and either long-term or moderate-term on-the-job training. Looking at the region, in a similar, you're going to see a similar vein across a lot of the pathways. The wages vary across the different regions. The MSP Metro region has the highest wages across experience levels and percentiles, and contains 55% of the pathway's total statewide employment. Rural Minneapolis region and urban region have very close average and median wages. The average wages in greater Minnesota regions are about $9,000 below the average pathway regions in the metro. So there's quite a difference. Looking at the other way to look at wages, the advertised wage for 2024 was 26.34 an hour, which was an increase of about $1.33 from the prior year estimates. And there were, again, about 4 hires per 1 unique job posting. And you can see on the chart to the right, the kind of the 3-year overall increase in wages. Looking at education, the education of those employed, the overall rate was 2.4% people unemployed, or 179 people. There are, again, 533 people underemployed, and as a reminder, that means they are more highly qualified than is required for the role that they're in. Almost half of the professionals in this field hold a high school diploma as their highest degree. Looking at demographics for this pathway, we have a little bit of an increase in the workforce that is under 25. It's 12.3% now, and it was about 9% before. And only 4.7% are over 64 years old. This pathway, similar to others, is predominantly white, 85.5%. However, that is decreasing. It's getting more diverse. And about 8.5% of the workers in this pathway are Hispanic or Latino. Females only represent about 10% of the workforce in this pathway. Males make up about 90%. There is only one aligned program in this pathway, and so you can see here that they had 139 awards conferred at 10 different post-secondary institutions. 97 of them were certificates that could be earned in less than 2 years. 22 were at the associate level, and 20 were certificates that could be earned in more than 2 years and less than 4. So that means all of the awards were below bachelor's level for this past year in this pathway. All right, moving on to the diesel pathway. Diesel equipment and truck. Occupations range from bus and truck mechanics and diesel engine specialists to earth drillers, except oil and gas. There's about 12,514 people who work in the diesel equipment and truck roles as of the second quarter of 2024. This pathway has the second highest location quotient or concentration among transportation pathways in Minnesota. 1.02 is the location quotient, but it dropped a little bit from 2023. And again, about 42% of the positions in this pathway will need to be filled by new talent in the next 5 years. The top industries in this pathway are machinery, equipment, and supplies merchant wholesalers, general freight trucking, and motor vehicle parts and suppliers. Moving into occupations of employment, about 83% of the people employed in this pathway work for private employers, while an estimated 3% are self-employed. There are about 14% that work for state, federal, or local government entities. Again, this information can be found in the report. On the chart here, you see the aligned occupations and the average annual wages. And you can see that the average annual wages for this particular pathway is just slightly under the average wages for the state. And you can see that about half of the occupations have a high local quotient or local concentration, and which ones are in total demand, the highest total demand. Looking at job postings, in this pathway, there were 2,984, about 3,000 unique job postings, which was about a 5% decrease over the previous year. There's an average of 2 hires for every 1 job posting in this pathway. And the share of positions advertised by staffing and temp agencies decreased further from about 11% in 2023 to about 6% in 2024. This kind of points to a little bit of a leveling in terms of challenges seen needing to fill these roles. The experience level requirements, this particular pathway has about 48% of the pathway's total statewide employment. I mean, in the metro region. It also has education and education and training requirements vary just slightly across this pathway, with most of them requiring a high school diploma or a GED, and most of them either having no previous work experience or less than 5 years, but a mix in terms of midterm or long-term on-the-job training. All right. Now I got off my screens. All right, so the regional wages, we've got the urban, the greater Minnesota, and the MSP Metro. As always, the Metro region again has the highest wages across experience levels and percentiles, and again 48% of the total pathways total employment. The urban and greater Minnesota are similar. But the urban greater Minnesota mean is about $4,000 higher than the rural greater Minnesota. Okay. The hourly wage advertised for this pathway was almost $31.50 per hour. It was a little bit of an increase, and the wages in this pathway have decreased about 2.1% since 2022. From an education standpoint and unemployment, this pathway has very low unemployment, 0.7%. We talked about that a little bit earlier. There's only 92 people unemployed in this pathway. The highest unemployment is for crane and tower operators. There is a fairly high number of underemployed employees in this pathway at 833. Again, the highest is for bus and truck mechanics. More than 2 in every 5 professionals in this pathway hold a high school diploma as their highest degree. And then the demographics we see in this pathway is overwhelmingly white, 92.9%, 5.3% Hispanic and Latine, and overwhelmingly male at 97.6%. We also see that the share of the workforce that's between 25 to 44 years old has been increasing for the past 2 years. It was 43.5% in 2022 and is now 48.5%, or almost half. And then finally, the post-secondary program awards for this pathway are listed here. And you can see that, again, there's overlap between the different occupations, and programs can align to more than one occupation. There were 245 awards conferred at 15 different post-secondary institutions in programs aligned to this pathway. Among these, 102 were at the associate level, 95 were certificates that could be earned in less than 2 years, or more than 2 years, but less than 4 years. And the average school had about 16 completions, but there was a range of between 70 to 1. There were no programs in this pathway that were delivered remotely. And now I'm going to turn it over to Erin, who's going to take us through the last 2.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Melinda. So we are on the home stretch. We've got just 2 more pathways to go through, but I encourage you to get up, move around, stretch a little bit here as we're moving through these last couple pathways, and start getting your questions ready. At the end of today's presentation, we will have some time to discuss your perspectives on the talent supply and demand landscape across these different transportation pathways, and we'll be here to field your questions as well. Jumping right into the marine and power sports pathway, professionals in marine and power sports work in roles from industrial equipment maintenance, outdoor power equipment maintenance, to small engine, motorboat, and motorcycle mechanics, just to name a few different types of roles. And in all, just over 4,000 people work in these roles across Minnesota as of the most recent data available. This was about a 3.2% decrease from last year's employment numbers, and you can see just how that total employment volume has really curved off. We hit kind of the pre-pandemic employment levels last year, and we saw now a tapering off of total employment across these occupations over the course of the year. Employment in this career pathway is primarily concentrated in other motor vehicle dealers, and the next highest industry of employment is support activities for air transportation. And these same two top industries are forecast to have the greatest amount of total demand over the next 10 years. But I have to say that the forecast for these industries is somewhat uncertain given global climate trends as well. Forecasts are always our best estimate of future demand based on current conditions. And what we've seen in Minnesota, in particular with the $22.8 billion tourism industry, really being significantly impacted by things like low levels of snowfall for 2 consecutive winters. And so those are things that will have impacts on career pathways like marine and power sports. So just wanted to call that out as a consideration as we're looking at these forecasts. So despite the flattening out of that overall employment outlook compared to what we saw last year, we still estimate that about 58% of the talent that is currently working in marine and power sports roles will need to be replaced with new talent by 2028. So of all occupations found in the marine and power sports pathway, 3 of them, aircraft service attendants, motorcycle mechanics, and motorboat mechanics and service technicians, are uniquely concentrated in Minnesota to a higher degree than what we see in the nation overall on average. And as you can see in this table here, on a whole, marine and power sports careers pay about an average of $52,000 per year, with some variation occupation by occupation, which you can see across the table, everything from $38,300 on average annually among the automotive and watercraft service attendants, all the way up to $82,000, just over that, for our electrical and electronics repairs in industrial equipment spaces. About 88% of people that work in this pathway work for private employers. That's similar to what we saw last year and the year before that, while an estimated 3.4% are self-employed. The remaining 8% work for state, federal, or local government entities, and that share has grown moderately over the past 3 years. Overall, there were 364 new jobs that were advertised in this pathway across Minnesota during 2024. This was down about 30% from 2023. And the total share of posted positions advertised by staffing and temp agencies also decreased to just 7% in 2024. So now we're kind of close to matching that volume for staffing and temp, like as what we saw in 2021 in kind of the peak pandemic period, which is really interesting. Posted wages remained nearly the same between 2022 and 2023, with an average of $20.50 per hour or so. And there are an average of 4 hires per every 1 unique job posting advertised as well. So kind of talking a little bit more about wage gains across the pathway, we did see average wages rising by about $3,300 on average annually compared to prior year's estimates. And at the entry level, we're seeing wages exceeding average entry level wages overall by about $7,000. And we're looking kind of as the pathway as a whole. So pretty strong entry level wages for the pathway as a whole, but again, really significant variation across. And I just want to caution that averages really, if they're in cases where there are a number of occupations with very, very high averages, it's going to skew higher than the reality experienced. on the ground. And we can see that actually in the next slide as we look at the posted wages. Occupations, this average wage has remained relatively constant over the past few years. You can see only a 2.8% increase in that median posted wage. And we're still sitting at that $20.50 per hour, really being the average across occupations within this pathway. At an overall pathway unemployment rate of about 2.9%, which is down from last year's unemployment estimates, we only really have about 125 unemployed marine and power sports professionals statewide. And while unemployment rates for certain occupations like automotive and watercraft service attendants and aircraft service attendants specifically declined substantially from their highs last year. Last year, both of those occupations were over 7% unemployment. Now we're seeing about 3.8, 3.9% among those roles. We're actually seeing the opposite happening for some of our other roles within the pathway. So roles like electrical and electronic repairers for those industrial equipment, we're seeing unemployment rising among those occupations now at about 5.3% for that role. And for motorboat operators, we're up to about 5% for that average unemployment over the course of that the most recent year. Marine and power sports professionals across the pathway, we have almost 600 or so that are underemployed, again, meaning that they have a higher level of education than their role typically requires. And the highest share of workers in this pathway do hold a high school diploma as their highest credential attained. Talent works in this career pathway on a whole are relatively young. That's been pretty consistent over the past few years. It's one of our the transportation pathways with the youngest workforce. About 23.1% of the marine and power sports workforce is under the age of 25. So almost nearly 1 in 4 is under 25. And we've seen this share increase over the past few years. And workers 64 years and older account for about 5.1% of the workforce. And the largest demographic group by race and ethnicity are non-Hispanic white. Our white talent represents about 84.5% of the total pathways workforce, with the next largest cohort being talent identifying with 2 or more races. And I should note here also that about 13.3% of this pathways workforce are female. And as Melinda mentioned in the report, we do have a breakdown of the demographics of graduates from programs that completed in the 2023 school year. So that's really interesting to see side by side. We break down the demographics by each individual occupation within the pathway and the graduate demographics from graduates from programs that are aligned to each of those occupations. So for instance, when you drill into that in the report, you'll actually see that while most of the occupations, with the exception of motorboat operators and aircraft service attendants, most have under 5% of their occupations workforce that are female. However, many of the graduates coming out of programs aligned have significantly more percentage of their graduates who are female in some of those key occupations. So we're seeing opportunity there with diversifying our workforce with greater diversity, at least by gender, in this pathway for those occupations. So taking a look at those programs in particular that are aligned to marine and power sports, and there's quite a range here. If any of you on the call are familiar with these occupation to program crosswalks that exist, they tend to be more inclusive than exclusive. And so there will be probably more program types than you might anticipate being aligned to marine and power sports. But in all, across all of these programs, there are about 270 awards that were conferred at 11 different Minnesota post-secondary institutions in programs that are aligned to these occupations. And that's just looking at the 2023 school year. We saw there were more completions aligned to these programs than the year prior, 54 more completions compared to the 2022 school year. And the largest share of them were at the associate degree level or the certificate level. That was really the bulk of the completions. Nearly about 70% of completions were either certificates or 2-year degrees. So I think next I wanted to feature, well, I really encourage you to take a look at the post-secondary strategy table that is in the report that does drill down into more of the demographics. I want to call out that we also look at where we may have an award gap for key occupations across each of these pathways. Interestingly, marine and power sports is one where most of our occupations are not seeing post-secondary award gaps given the current climate kind of demand. However, though, that electrical and electronics repairs for commercial and industrial equipment. So that is the one occupation where we do see that there's likely an undersupply of post-secondary graduates aligned to local demand when we benchmark it nationally about kind of where we would anticipate we would want our new graduate volumes to be based on Minnesota's demand for that talent. And that is one of the highest paying occupations in this pathway and across many of the pathways in transportation. So know that that level of detail is in the report. That can really assist for those of you that do programs that are in the current technical education space or program approval space or developing and growing your own programs. This can be a resource to you to tell your story and dig in a little deeper. And with that, we'll jump right into our final, the last but not least, career pathway for discussion today. This is truck driving. And it is by far the highest total employment of all our transportation pathways by a factor of 5. Over 96,000 people work in the truck driving pathway. That is down by about 1.5% from last year. So we've seen like really a flattening out of that employment curve. And you can see that we are really hovering right about where we were pre-pandemic. It was a very steady recovery in this particular pathway. And we are anticipating employment volumes to rise slightly across Minnesota by nearly 900 total jobs over the next 5 years. That's 0.2% on average annually. And that's primarily due to a tight talent pool. We have significant demand, but there's not enough talent entering into those roles to meet with local demand. And it's important to note that this is perhaps the most vulnerable set of entry-level occupations to technology innovation in transportation. We actually have an additional special feature within this report series that was not in prior versions of this report that digs a bit into what we're seeing for autonomous vehicle operation and how it appears in job posting data as well. So use that as a resource, kind of just to give you the highlights of that here. We're not seeing widespread mentions of autonomous vehicle operation and kind of the related keywords associated with that among truck driving occupations right now. However, it's appearing enough there and in the supervisory roles that are related to truck driving that now is an important time to be strategic in developing career pathway opportunities between post-secondary and private employers to ensure that people in these roles have a career path in the next iteration of skill demand in this sector. And as we saw in marine and power sports as a pathway as well, there's high replacement demand need in truck driving. So despite all the changes that are likely to come in this sector, by all measures of current and forecasted future demand currently for these roles, we're still anticipating that we will need to replace about 56% of all talent currently employed in these roles with new talent due to job exits, transfers, retirements, and so on. And so there will be significant needs to fill roles that will be vacated due to those job exits. And over time, the functions of those roles will likely shift. And so it will be important for training and education partners to be working closely with employers to meet that demand. Now, of all occupations that are found in the truck driving pathway, school bus drivers and shuttle drivers and chauffeurs are the two that are uniquely concentrated in Minnesota to a higher degree than what we see in the nation overall. They have location quotients of 1.43 and 1.35 respectively. So, and anytime we're over kind of that 1.25 or 25% over concentration, we say that that's a uniquely high concentration of talent for our community. So And on average, when we're looking at wages as well, we have a pretty high wage environment here in Minnesota compared to nationally. Truck driving careers pay about $55,400 per year. That's a bit below that average overall statewide wage. But it's important to note that these wage estimates don't incorporate things like sign-on bonuses or pieces like that, which are more common in this career pathway and certain other career pathways where we do see kind of the lower overall wage or lower posted wages. And about 86% of people employed in this pathway work for private employers, and about 5.3% are self-employed. This is actually a bit lower than I would have anticipated, knowing the industry and kind of perceiving, what I've seen of the industry. But another 8.6% work for state, federal, or local government. Now, digging in a little bit into the job posting environment, we had about 16,400 new jobs that were advertised in truck driving roles during 2024. That was down about 14% from 2023. And we saw volumes of positions advertised by staffing and temp agencies in this pathway also decreased slightly. It's down to about 6% of all postings are by staffing and temp agencies now. We estimate that there are about 3 hires for every 1 unique job posting. This is also a pathway where we see more evergreen posting, where employers will add a job posting and leave it up for a significant period of time. And so it's important to note that when we're talking about job posting data, it's totally different from a hire. It's totally different than even a job vacancy, if you're familiar with like the job vacancy survey or job openings. Multiple hires or no hires at all may happen off of a job posting, depending on the environment. However, job postings are a great indicator of employer current demand and employer behavior, as well as the skills and certifications that they're seeking for those roles. So in the reports, you will find much more detail about the certifications, the foundational skills, the technical skills that employers are looking for, as well as the top recruiting employers based on job posting activity. So don't miss that in the report if that's important to you. We also have a feature in this particular pathways report about trends in commercial driver's license demand and employers hiring for talent with a CDL. On the next slide here, we have a little bit more detail on the wages and experience level requirements across each of these occupations. I won't dig into a lot of detail here because I know that this is probably familiar to many of you that are on the screen here. But on the next slide, I wanted to just feature for you that similar to what we've seen in other career pathways today, overrepresentation of employment within the MSP metro area. But in this pathway, we have one of the smallest differences between urban and rural greater Minnesota wages, and a smaller wage gap between urban greater Minnesota and the MSP metro median wages. So a little bit more kind of similarity and stability in terms of the wage comparison across the state. Overall, from the job postings perspective, we saw posted wages increase to an average of about $27 per hour as of last year. And as you can see, that that year-over-year trend line sorry, I can't actually see it, over to the right, from January 2022 to the close of 2024, we saw posted wages go up by 22.5%. And so that is a signal of the difficulty that employers are having in finding talent. On the next page, to reiterate some of those hiring difficulties, this is again the pathway with the largest volume of total employed talent, about 46,000 workers. We're sitting right now at an unemployment rate of it says 4.3 here, but I believe it's actually 3.3. So I apologize for that. But it's up from 2.6 last year. So we did see an overall increase in that unemployment rate. It's highest among industrial truck and tractor operators. We have a large number of workers who are underemployed, having a higher level of educational background than is currently required for their position. given the nature of the roles within this pathway, that is to be expected. More than 2 in 5 professionals hold a high school diploma as their highest level of education, and nearly 10% don't have a high school diploma either. This is one of the pathways where we have an older than average workforce. About 6.8% of the truck driving workforce is under 25, and about 8.6 are over 64. And when it comes to demographics, you can see here that our Black talent represents about 10.6% of our workforce, and about 6.4% identify as Hispanic or Latine. Here we have nearly 14% who identify as female. And when we dig into the graduate demographics, it's very, very similar. About 12.6 of graduates from programs aligned to this pathway are female. And so we see a consistency over time when it comes to the gender demographics of our workforce, as well as our graduates overall across the state. And that also actually carries over to our demographics by race and ethnicity. We do have slightly more diverse new graduate demographics coming out of programs aligned to the truck driving pathway than what we see in the current workforce, but that does vary by occupation within the pathway. And with that, we close out the content for today's presentation. Looks like we've left you only with about 3 minutes left for questions. But I would invite you to please share those now, either by unmuting your line or adding them into the chat. And I believe we can stick around for a couple of extra minutes beyond the hour if that's of interest to folks.
While people are waiting, maybe either to unmute or drop a question in the chat. I just want to thank everybody for attending this presentation today. Thank you to the RealTime Talent team as well. We're always excited to get this report each year. I will be sending out an email tomorrow morning with the link to the recording of this presentation. So if you need to go back and take another listen to it or forward it on to a colleague, you will have it in your inbox.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And Alyssa, I'm seeing your question about aligning SOCs to the SIP codes. Yes. So we have our own SIP-SOC crosswalk that we use. It's very similar to the national, now I'm going to forget the name of the organization. So Catherine or Melinda, jump in if it's on the tip of your tongue. But the national SIP-SOC crosswalk, that's I keep wanting to say it's NCES, but it's not NCES's crosswalk. But it's very similar. If you're interested in the details of that, I am happy to send it along to you so that you can see the full crosswalk for all occupations. Lighthouse, it is not, but it is also similar to that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think it is NCES.
It is NCES.
National Center for Education Statistics. Yeah.
Okay.
And just to call out, Erin mentioned that we have a post-secondary strategy table in the full report that gives some more demographic information about graduates and potential award gaps. And there we are a little more restrictive in terms of how we are aligning programs with occupations. We selected the programs that are most closely aligned rather than looking at the full SIP-SOC crosswalk for that table.
Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that, Catherine. Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? This has been really great.
Yeah, please ask away.
I know we're at kind of the top of the hour here. I don't want to be respectful of time. It does sound like we can hang on for a couple more minutes, but just wanted to thank those that have joined us and appreciate the time you've spent with us. Hopefully this has been a good value to you. I know it's been very interesting to me. So thank you to the RealTime Talent staff and your crew for all you've done for this project.
Yes, absolutely. It's been a pleasure. It always is. And I'm seeing a question from Amy about how I don't know if actually the question is geared toward the Transportation Center of Excellence or to RealTime Talent. But the question is, what can you offer schools to help them expose their students to these industries? And I think there's something that both that is Center of Excellence and that RealTime Talent can do to help help schools to expose students. At RealTime Talent, we do partner with colleges and secondary schools, oftentimes through CTE, but it does not have to be career and technical education related, to support with doing specific analysis within your community, something that's very focused to the zip codes around your community or the counties that you select. So supply and demand analysis like this, or more customized qualitative research as well. We do surveys, focus groups, design workshops, and even can branch into things like youth participatory research, design, and support in those types of efforts. So I'll let the team at the Transportation Center of Excellence also respond from their chair on how they can support school.
Yeah.
There's quite a few things that we can do. We have a list of those on our website. I believe Cassidy put that in the chat for a link of those items, and feel free to reach out to us if you're interested in engaging in any of those items.
Great. Thank you, everybody. It's been a pleasure. If anyone has questions, please feel free to reach out to us. Catherine's email address is included at the end of each of the reports, but you can reach out to any one of us if you have questions about the data that was presented today. Thank you so much and have a great afternoon.